Evocation of Virgil and Tolkien's Art by Dr. Robert E. Morse is an academic examination of aspects of Virgil's Aeneid and The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you're like me, these weird side trips and investigations of Middle-earth can be fun, so I took a look at this treatise to see what it had to say. Though I haven't done a full reading of the Aeneid or Lord of the Rings in a couple years, I'm still reasonably familiar with and enjoy them both. If you're interested in some of my critical writing on Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I'll have links in the description, and while you're thinking on it, you can like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel of another YouTube creator you enjoy, where the algorithm will cast them into the fires of Mount Doom. The core of this book is a trio of comparisons among some of the main characters. The section on Aragorn and Aeneas works the best because they have the most in common. Aragorn is the character most like the heroic figures of mythology and folklore. It's not surprising then that he shares character traits and certain plot beats with Aeneas. I think there are major differences in how the authors use their respective characters and what that means for their myth-making. But the literary comparisons are pretty reasonable on the whole. They may even make you reevaluate Aragorn as a figure in literature, belonging to a long line of genuinely heroic characters who mean something, not only in the context of the story, but also to the wider culture. You won't have to look far on YouTube, for example, to find people discussing Aragorn as a figure of authentic masculine identity. Morse and his analysis prefigures this consideration by decades, so he was clearly onto something with his comparison. For me, a major difference between the books is that Aragorn is not the hero of the Lord of the Rings in the same way that Aeneas is in the Aeneid. It is Frodo, and to a lesser extent Samwise, who display altogether different virtues from other protagonists, who are the heroes of the Lord of the Rings. This also means the novel and the ideas it's trying to convey are quite different from what Virgil is attempting, even though both authors are engaged in the same exercise of myth-making. The comparison between Dido and Denethor is, to me, the most interesting and surprising. Both of them are considered as strong and competent leaders who, through grief and pride, put their personal desires ahead of serving their community, and ultimately take up self-immolation as a final hobby. The descent into madness for both characters is examined in the language the authors use and the effects it has, not only on Dido and Denethor, but also on everyone around them. I don't really buy the comparison of Frodo and Aeneas. Here I feel Morse really stretches, and for me these parallels never really work, in part because of what I talked about before when discussing the comparison of Aragorn and Aeneas. Frodo's character traits and the actions he takes throughout the novel have very little in common with Aeneas, and the connections Morse draws between them are too broad to be effective. Aragorn may be like heroic protagonists of old, but Frodo certainly is not. Tolkien was a learned scholar of literature and no doubt had at least working knowledge of the Aeneid. But aside from being in the long tradition of reinventing the epic, mythology, and folklore traditions, there isn't much room to say Tolkien is actively following Virgil. The Lord of the Rings has more in common with Paradise Lost by Tolkien's fellow countryman, John Milton. This is not to say there's no value in looking at comparisons between the novel and Virgil's epic poem. In fact, I think it's instructive, not only as an interesting textual examination, but also as a look at the incredibly long tradition of Western literature and how even different works influence one another over time. If you're into scholarly examinations of Tolkien's work, check out this book. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my peculiar notions. If you appreciate this channel and want to support it, you know what to do. Until next time, read some good books like The Lord of the Rings and the Aeneid. Live and be well.